The lion was standing over the body when they found her. Not pacing, not feeding, standing, still as stone. Amber eyes locked on the corridor entrance, 300 kilograms of muscle and silence, daring anything in the universe to take another step forward. The Vreth security team stopped moving. All 6 of them. Commander Sera had handled predator containment scenarios 17 times across 4-star systems. He had protocols. He had pulse lances. He had a full unit of soldiers who had never once broken formation under fire. They broke it now. Back, one of them whispered. Nobody argued. The lion didn't move, just watched. That was somehow worse. Then the human spoke. Nkosi, down. Her voice came from somewhere beneath the lion. Low, calm. The kind of calm that doesn't perform itself, the kind that lives in a person's bones. The lion looked at her, actually looked, tilted its enormous head, considered the request with what could only be described as deliberate thought, and then slowly folded itself to the floor beside her. Sera's sensor array showed the human's biometrics, pulse elevated but controlled, cortisol within functional range, no signs of shock. She was lying against the wall, with a gash across her shoulder, one hand pressed to the wound, the other resting on the lion's mane, like it was the most natural thing in the universe. She needs medical, the human said. Sera processed that sentence 3 times. She. The human nodded toward the dark shape at the far end of the corridor. Sera's scanner found it. A juvenile lion, female, partially hidden behind a collapsed storage crate. Breathing shallow. One leg at a wrong angle. The human had been guarding the cub, with her body, in the dark, alone, while the adult male stood over her and the station's entire security wing stayed outside, too afraid to enter. Sera looked at his unit. His unit looked at him. What is she? Someone murmured through the comm. Nobody had an answer. Her name was Sera Voss, xenobiological field officer, seconded to Waystation Dreth-9 6 months ago as part of the Interspecies Ecological Preservation Initiative, a program most of the Vreth administration considered a political gesture and nothing more. Nobody had expected her to actually do anything. The medical team worked fast, though 2 of them kept glancing at Nkosi with the wide-eyed, full-body attention of creatures deciding whether to run. The lion ignored them. His gaze stayed on Sera, tracking every needle, every movement, every small sound she made. He's going to be a problem, the lead medic said, quietly. He's going to be fine, Sera said. Just don't move fast. The cub needs surgery. We'd have to. I'll carry her. Silence. Yule, the medic stopped, recalibrated. The adult male won't permit. He'll permit me. Sera was already sitting up, ignoring the hand the medic extended. She looked at Nkosi. Something passed between them, not a command, not a trick, something older than language, some negotiation conducted entirely in stillness and eye contact. The lion stood, stepped aside. Sera crossed the corridor, crouched beside the cub, and gathered the injured animal into her arms. The cub was nearly 40 kilograms. She carried her anyway. Sera watched from the doorway and felt something he couldn't immediately name. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't fear. It was the sensation of watching something that shouldn't work. Working, the universe bending slightly around a human being and declining to explain why. How long was she in there? He asked his second-in-command. Station logs show the containment breach at 0340. We were mobilized by 0412. A pause. We didn't enter until 0631. And she was in there the whole time. Yes, sir. Alone with both animals. Yes, sir. Sera watched Sera carry the cub toward the medical bay, Nkosi padding behind her at a distance of exactly 2 body lengths, close enough to act, far enough to trust. Pull her file, he said. Everything. Start from birth. He needed to understand her. He suspected he wouldn't be able to. Her file was not what Sera expected. No military record. No predator handling certification beyond the basic xenophonic clearance every IPI officer carried. One commendation from a previous posting, a research station in the Kale system, and a note attached by her supervising xenobiologist, Officer Voss demonstrates an unusual capacity for interspecies trust acquisition. Recommend continued field placement. Cannot fully explain results. See attached behavioral logs. Sera read the behavioral logs. Then he read them again. On Cale 4, Sera had spent 4 months embedded with a pack of apex predators that had killed 3 researchers in the previous year. She'd made first contact in week 2. By month 3, the pack had begun sleeping in proximity to her field shelter. The attached footage showed a creature twice the size of Nkosi resting its head in her lap while she took blood samples. She hadn't sedated it. It had simply led her. She doesn't train them, Sera said slowly. She doesn't condition them. No, sir. Then what does she do? His second-in-command, Ithari, pulled up the interview transcript from the Cale posting. One line was highlighted. Sera's response when the review board had asked her the same question. I stay. That's mostly it. When they're scared, when they're dangerous, when everything in my body is screaming at me to leave, I stay. They've never met anything that does that. It confuses them at first, then it means something to them. The station shuddered. Not metaphorically. The actual walls vibrated, a low, resonant impact that knocked 2 items off Sera's desk and triggered the corridor emergency lighting. Then the alarm. Collision class. Something had hit the outer hull. Something large. Sera was already moving when the second impact came, harder, directional, like something pushing against the station rather than striking it. The wildlife containment ward was on sublevel 3, where Sera was, where the cub was. His comm crackled before he reached the door. It was the containment ward's medical officer, voice stripped down to pure flat control. Commander, the adult male is gone. Gone how? A pause that lasted too long. The exterior scanner just picked him up. He's outside the station. He's on the hull. Sera stopped walking. He's on the hull. Something followed the cub's distress signal into the sector. A scavenger-class vessel. They're trying to dock at the emergency port. Another pause. Nkosi is between them and the airlock. 300 kilograms of apex predator. In vacuum. On the exterior hull of a space station. Guarding a door. Is he? Sera started. His suit beacon is active. Hers too. Hers? He started running. The airlock cycled. Sera was already in it. She'd pulled an emergency EVA suit, the fast seal kind, rated for 12 minutes of exposure, and hadn't told anyone. There was no order to follow, no protocol she was technically violating, no regulation that covered this specific situation in any manual ever written. She'd simply looked at the external feed, seen Nkosi alone on the hull, and gone. Sera reached the outer bay in time to watch through the viewport as the airlock finished its pressure equalization and the exterior door opened. The scavenger vessel, a Reth-class opportunist ship for crew, the kind that followed distress signals and emergency beacons the way carrion birds followed smoke, had already extended a boarding clamp. One figure in a commercial-grade environment suit was moving across the hull toward the emergency port. Nkosi saw them. The lion had been standing still. Now, he wasn't. He moved across the hull the way lions move through tall grass, low, deliberate, unhurried in the way that only applies to things that have already decided the outcome. The boarding figure stopped, raised a handheld deterrent tool, the kind rated for most biological threats. The lion kept moving. The figure backed up, then stopped because behind them, the rest of their crew was watching from the ship's viewport, and you don't retreat in front of your crew. Basic psychology. Universal constant. The lion stopped 2 meters away and sat down. Just sat and stared. The deterrent tool started to waver. Then Sera was there, crossing the hull in the careful magnetic boot shuffle of someone who'd clearly done EVA work before but didn't love it, and she walked directly between the boarding figure and Nkosi without slowing down. She stopped between them, facing the boarding crew, arms loose at her sides, not threatening, not retreating, just present in the specific, immovable way of someone who has decided that this is where they stand and the universe can negotiate around it. Sera watched the boarding figure's suit telemetry. He pulled it up on the secondary monitor. Heart rate, 190. Respiration rapid. Cortisol spiked. He pulled up Sera's. Heart rate 88. 88. She's calmer than I am, Ithari said quietly from behind him. Sera didn't answer. He was watching the boarding figure take one step back, then another, then turn and retreat to their ship's airlock. The boarding clamp released. The vessel drifted back. On the hull of the station, in the silence of vacuum, Sera turned and looked at Nkosi. The lion bumped his enormous head against her shoulder, a gesture that nearly knocked her off her magnetic footing. She grabbed his mane, steadied herself. Then she sat down next to him on the hull of the station, in the void between stars, and put her arm around 300 kilograms of predator like they were simply waiting for the next thing together. Sera realized his hands were shaking. He also realized for the first time that he wasn't afraid of the lion at all. He was afraid of her. The cub was named Zuri by the time she could walk without a limp. 6 weeks of recovery. 6 weeks of Sera sleeping on a cot in the containment ward, eating station rations, filing her reports from a tablet balanced on Nkosi's flank while he slept. The medical staff stopped flinching when they entered. One of them, a young Vreth named Chorus, started leaving an extra food tray outside the ward without being asked. Nobody talked about it. Everyone noticed. Sera filed his report to Central Command with the footage attached. All of it, the corridor, the hull, the boarding deterrence, the 6 weeks. His written summary was 3 paragraphs. His recommendation was 4 words. Do not reassign her. Central Command sent back 11 questions, 2 formal inquiries, and a xenopsychology research team that wanted to study Sera's neurological profile. She declined politely. The day the containment bay doors were finally opened to allow Nkosi and Zuri access to the station's larger habitat ring, Sera stood in the observation gallery above. Most of his staff was there. Chorus was there. Even the 2 soldiers who had broken formation on the first night were there, pressed against the railing, watching. Sera walked in first. Zuri bounded to her immediately. 30 kilograms of adolescent lion hitting her midsection with enough force to stagger her, the cub making low, urgent sounds and pressing her massive head against Sera's chest. Sera laughed. It was the first time Sera had heard her laugh, and it surprised him, unself-conscious, genuine, unaware of being watched. Nkosi walked in behind, slower, surveyed the habitat ring, the observation gallery, the staff watching from above. His gaze found Sera. They looked at each other for a long moment, Commander and Lion, Apex and Apex, 2 things that had learned to read the other's territory. The Lion looked away first. Not submission, not defeat, something more like acknowledgement. Sera heard Ithari exhale beside him. What do we do with her? Ithari asked, not unkindly, with the genuine confusion of someone standing in front of a thing they don't have categories for. Sera watched Sera below, sitting cross-legged on the habitat floor, Zuri half in her lap, Nkosi a warm wall of muscle against her back, her hand moving slowly through his mane while she read something on her tablet like none of this was extraordinary. We learned from her, Sera said. Ithari waited for more. There wasn't more. That was the whole answer. Below them, Zuri batted at Sera's tablet. Sera moved it out of reach without looking up. The cub tried again. Sera raised an eyebrow. The cub subsided, grumbling, and tucked her head under Sera's arm. Nkosi watched all of this with the patience of something that had chosen where it belonged and stopped questioning the choice. The station kept moving through the dark between stars, and in the habitat ring of Waystation Dreth-9, something strange and difficult to name had taken root. The particular kind of trust that only grows in the worst moments between the most unlikely things when one of them simply refuses to run.